The morning comes with its familiar aches. His hands, rough as tree bark, grip the wooden handle of his tool. The air smells of earth and yesterday's rain. Simple work, honest work. But it fills his bones with a weight that even sleep cannot lift. You won't believe me, but I swear this is true. My name is Ethan Morales, and my life ended before it was supposed to. He steps onto the porch and the world answers with damp earth and crushed grass. A cold nail rests on the rail beside stacked tools. The sky is a flat sheet that seems to wait without saying why. Unease rises in him without spectacle. It is not panic. It is not sorrow. It is the quiet sense that time is a lake, and an invisible finger has drawn a curve upon it that will not fade. In the kitchen, the steam lifts a dark ribbon, and warmth spreads across his sternum like a hand that knows where to press. He checks the list. He checks the weather. He checks the clock and pauses. He remembers waking before the alarm to a number that felt like a soft bell, 4:44. Only a time, yet the repetition lands with the neatness of a folded letter, as if a reader has turned the page and touched the margin. He drives through streets that smell of wet asphalt and damp leaves. At the main crossing, the red light lingers beyond habit, and the windshield beads hold their places as if gravity has stopped to think. He rests his forearms on the wheel and listens to breath, to a tiny relay under the dash, to a pulse in the neck that drifts away from the rhythm of the song. A clean kind of fear gathers, not the kind that runs, but the kind that waits for instruction. By noon, he steps out for food. Wind travels the block like a messenger you can only track by tug and wake. Receipts scuttle, leaves scratch along curbstones. The air tastes greener than morning. Somewhere metal clatters. Somewhere a child calls for a ball. He stands still and lets the world speak in that overfull way that reads as silence to anyone in a hurry. The unease does not spike. It spreads, like warmth sliding under a door. Back at work, the handle of his tool becomes a pulse in his palms. Wood against callus, callus against wood, an old conversation. The rhythm drifts slightly out of phase, a half beat late, then true again. He sets the tool down and hears the echo his mind lays in the gap. It feels like kindness, as if time is giving him a little room to decide how to stand. You stand with him at the ledge of action where everything is possible and nothing yet demanded. The afternoon thins. Clouds pull apart like wool teased by careful fingers. A flock passes overhead, not as scattered points but as a single body with a single will, banking with a grace the human frame remembers only in sleep. He slows the truck to watch and senses, without evidence, that he is being watched back, not by a threat, but by a knowing gaze that is in no hurry to speak. He sets the thought aside, and it returns with the persistence of tide. Small oddities keep their own counsel. An elevator halts so perfectly that the seam between carriage and floor vanishes, and he feels for a breath that if he keeps walking, he might not stop. A wall clock blinks once, and then holds its face with the dignity of a sitter. Laughter down the corridor takes on the clear ring of glass. None of this would count as a sign the way he was taught to look. All of it counts as a sign the way the soul recognizes pattern before words arrive. Dusk brings him home with fatigue, chalking the back of the tongue, a taste that means the day was honest and the body was used like a good tool. The house breathes domestic music, a pan finding rest on a stove, a footfall testing a jump on the last stair, a washing machine that believes in small tides. He answers the motions that make a family, a question with a nod, a task with a shoulder, a smile with a tightening of the eyes that means affection without noise. Evening lifts a silver edge under the door of the world. On the porch, night carries a soft temperature and the sweet rot of leaf mold. The windows begin to glow one by one. For a heartbeat, the pattern seems deliberate, like a map in light for travelers who do not yet know they are traveling. Unease ripens into attention. It stops asking and starts keeping watch. He lies down early. The room holds the musk of laundry soap. The ceiling is plain, yet it vibrates with the memory of the day. He closes his eyes and watches the mind offer images that try to explain what does not want, explaining a stoplight acting like an oracle, a gust of wind wearing a familiar voice, a formation of birds that seems to know where he will be tomorrow. He lets the images go like leaves given to a current. Sleep takes him by degrees. In that blue place before depth, he hears the soft clicks of the house settling and the distant hush of highway that can pass for sea when night is kind. The number returns in the drift, that patient sequence from dawn. 4:44, like steps carved into morning. Repetition is not a trap, it is a preparation. The next day presses beyond the wall like a tide holding itself. Your breathing slows with his, your body loosens its grip on gravity. You remain with him on the seam between one kind of hour and another. The next page is turning, quiet as moth wings in a cool room. The world is about to choose a new tempo, and he will be asked to match it. For now, hold this exact hush, let it train the ears. A message is moving across the lake of hours toward him, a single ripple that carries more weight than a storm, touching shore. Breathe in. Loosen the jaw, soften your shoulders. The evening task begins in simplicity. A neighbor's porch, a ladder that has carried small rescues, a bulb wrapped in paper that smells faintly of dust. Ethan plants a foot, then another, while a moth writes a looping sentence inside the yellow halo above the stoop. You move with him through the sequence the body knows, hand to rail, knee locked, weight shifted to the ball of the foot, the quiet check a worker performs without ceremony. A breath. Another. The wood answers with a muted complaint that stays within courtesy, and the night opens its cool palm. The shift arrives like a vowel slipping in an easy word. The ladder does not break. It reconsiders its loyalty by a finger's width. Gravity hesitates, then forgets its manners. For a blink, there is the wild ballet of flailing, then the choreography stops paying attention to him at all. The world tilts, the porch spins, and the night air rushes past with the coolness of river water in late summer. A trace of iron rises to his tongue. A distant kitchen clinks far away, as if it belongs to another story already told. He lands, and the prediction of pain cries out with perfect logic, yet the body refuses the script. No knife of impact, no roaring nerve, instead a widening. A release that feels both forbidden and completely right. You feel it with him, the immediate subtraction of weight, as if an interior harness is unclipped. The sound field swells. The ordinary world lengthens into a single long tone that keeps folding into itself until it becomes ocean. A nearby voice tries to reach him and dissolves into surf. Another attempt falls into the same tide. He sees his own chest not moving and does not panic. His palms register the grit of the walkway, even as his awareness stands elsewhere. Perspective loosens like a knot pulled wrong for years that finally decides to soften. He is standing, and yet he is not standing. He is above the scene that used to hold him. The geometry of the porch looks new, lines cleaner, edges sincere. His own face is a question he has asked for a lifetime and is only now hearing without echo. Breathe in gently. A thread begins, and he cannot say from where. It is not a rope and not light, though it behaves like both. It hums near the center of his being and draws with the confidence of a river taking a leaf, not as a command but as an invitation perfected by time. The thread is alive. It meets him the way a faithful memory meets the body after years apart, without accusation, only recognition. You witness its pull and find the motion kind rather than urgent, steady rather than dramatic. Weightlessness arrives with the dignity of an elder and sits beside him. The absence of pain is not emptiness, it is fullness without the grit. Relief stands before understanding, and that order teaches more than analysis ever could. Perception runs ahead, meaning follows like a respectful companion, ready to do its work when invited. He notes this without words, the way a farmer knows rain by temperature before the first drop speaks. His skin remembers pressure and then releases the habit of remembering. The architecture of the moment grows spacious, each second lengthened, each detail permitted to exist without tiresome commentary. The smell of wet soil becomes a hymn. The electricity in the porch wire turns to a faint warmth that blesses rather than threatens. Even the hard corner of the step that should have bruised him now looks like a promise kept by matter. Soften the shoulders. Upward is not a direction so much as a truth. He rises because rising is what happens when the dense parts of a life are briefly set down. The night sky opens, not as an endless void, but as a roof that retracts to welcome a guest expected all along. There is a sense of being waited for, not summoned by strangers, recognized by the origin of regard. He does not see a face, he does not hear a sentence. He simply knows he is held in notice. The streets lie below like quiet arteries, and he understands that what he called noise was often a refusal to listen. In this delicate altitude, even street lamps confess their purpose, and every patch of darkness carries a peace that ordinary rooms can rarely hold. A neighbor kneels over the fallen shape and tries a name that fails to be heard. The attempt is tender. The attempt matters. Still, the tide goes the other way, and the pull is stronger than concern. His breath, the old engine, has no work. The chest that used to be a small factory now becomes a still lake. He does not miss the heave. He does not miss the burn. He does not miss the ache restored after each shift. Silence begins to learn his contours as if fitting him for a garment made long ago. He participates in being without the usual cost, and it shocks him how familiar it feels, as if this texture was the one he sought in every tired afternoon nap and never found. There is a soft inventory all at once. He notices the places where fear used to live, like a tenant that never paid rent. He notices the rooms reclaimed. He notices how memory files itself in a new order and returns the good without the sting. He notices that the pull on the thread favors no ambition, no reputation, no worry about unfinished projects. The pull respects only presence. It prizes only consent. Soften the brow and the tongue. You travel the seam between here and more with him. There is no corridor yet, only the clear sense that passage will volunteer when needed. The air near him becomes a slow shimmer, like heat above a road, yet it is cool to the skin. Texture in the night sharpens, the grain of the wooden rail, the tiny crack in the bulb glass, the pale scuff on the ladder rung, all of it suddenly honest. Nothing pretends. Even the shadow under the bush keeps its legitimacy. A theology forms without citations. Death is not a wall, it is a veil so thin a faithful breath could pass through. Suffering is not the doorway, consent island. The body is not a prison, it is a generous house that knows when to open its door. Time is not a tyrant, it is a steward who pauses when a greater host attends the guest. These sentences move through him like the flavor of bread rather than the idea of bread, nourishment without argument. He does not fight the rise, he does not clutch the ground, he does not bargain. The instinct to insist on control sits down and folds its hands like a child who finally trusts that the ride will end in kindness. Astonishment remains, but the panic has no chair. Dislocation is real, yet it reads as being placed where placement was always meant. What should terrify instead steadies. What should alienate instead belongs. The porch recedes. The neighborhood reclines into a map of mercy. The sky leans close the way a parent leans over a crib to listen to breathing that needs no checking. Somewhere a dog notices a change and offers a single whine. Somewhere a leaf finds final rest in a gutter and has never been so eloquent. Somewhere in his own chest the hidden room opens, and the thread passes through like a path that was waiting for feet. The lesson is plain. Relief is the first gift, not the last. The mind wants explanations. Heaven begins with presence. Understanding will arrive, but it will arrive as fruit, not bait. For now the task is simpler and deeper. Yield to the pull that knows your name better than you know your own. Ethan yields. You feel the consent cross the threshold, a quiet yes without syllables. The ocean sound softens, the upward truth strengthens, the veil thins. The shimmer thickens into a doorway that remembers welcome. Radiance does not blind, it arranges. Scattered brightness finds a pattern, strands knitting into a patient passage. Ethan does not walk so much as consent to being carried, a motion like drifting in warm water. You move beside him, close enough to feel the quiet mathematics of light sorting your names. The passage breathes. A slow inhale along the walls, a soft exhale at his shoulders, a rhythm that says he is not trespassing. Colors act like tones, gold humming in bone, blue settling behind the eyes, silver resting on the tongue like cool metal without taste. Air holds a high country sweetness. Reverent calm settles like a shawl drawn with care. Shapes gather ahead, not bodies but presences that prefer to be known rather than looked at. They keep distance by courtesy, not by need. Peace thickens until it becomes gravity. Ethan steadies without effort, and your own pulse lowers to meet the room. No faces appear, yet recognition arrives the way a lullaby is known without memory. Breathe in slowly. Nothing speaks in the usual way. Meaning chooses a shorter path. It enters through conscience and lands in the center of the chest, where decisions form before words. The gathering does not interrogate his past or test his worth. It receives him like a quiet harbor receives a small boat after long water. Order appears. Not control, order. Thoughts that used to crowd like commuters now step aside and fall into place. Silence becomes a librarian. One presence widens its nearness. The nearness has temperature, warm but not hot, with the softness of being held as a child. A small sphere forms between them, not object and not flame, carrying the intention of both. It moves with tenderness that treats him as fragile and also unbreakable. The sphere enters his chest as if returning from an errand, and peace anchors like a mooring dropped in deep water. The anchor works quickly. The tremor in his hands ceases, though he has not willed them still. The breath he is not taking finds an ease his old breath never achieved. Small knots, fear of failure, fear of being unseen, fear of running late to his own life untie without spectacle. You feel the untying as tiny releases in your own body, as if someone loosened invisible straps you forgot you wore. Loosen the jaw and the belly. The corridor lengthens without distance, widening into room while remaining a path. Light stays low, like a lamp kept kind for a sleeper. The presences fan aside, attendants creating space for a guest who does not demand it. They do not perform. Their stillness is the gift. Ethan understands they will keep him steady for whatever is next, like friends walking beside a narrow ledge without comment. Sound joins, singing without lyric, harmony without choir. The music lands below thought and above sensation, where gratitude lives when given time. It does not entertain, it aligns. In its presence, the small gears of resentment stop grinding. The mind's habit of rehearsing arguments forgets its lines. The heart learns a longer rhythm, and you adopt it without effort. A single truth arrives quietly. Guidance often does not argue or explain, it orders. Ethan sees a picture inside, shelves messy for years, standing straight at last, every book in its rightful place. There is nothing to defend, only an arrangement to receive and live from. Calming is not accident, it is architecture. The gathering communicates again, simple without being small: be steady, receive peace, consent to being carried. He notices how the sense touches his history. Days he tried to fix others by force, seasons when noise hid emptiness, hours he rushed past wonder. None of it is condemned. All of it is seen and refiled under mercy. He remains within mercy until it stops feeling like a visitor and feels like air. Relax the tongue against the roof of the mouth. Ahead, the passage brightens in increments, a sunrise that refuses to startle. The beings neither block nor bow. They present courage to borrow. Holiness here does not require spectacle to be strong. Peace has weight, pleasant as a heavy blanket in winter. He senses he could stand here for what would count as years and never tire. Details become language. The light that composes the walls has a pulse that matches the slow thud of his resting heart, even though the old labor has stopped. The floor that is not a floor supports him with the assurance of a well-made plank. The air moves in woven spirals, and where they pass, they leave clarity, dusting the shelves of thought as they travel. You keep pace with him, step for step, breath for breath, though stepping is mostly metaphor now. The world he left does not accuse him for leaving. It waits like a porch light left on by someone who believes in return. The world he has entered does not claim by force. It asks only that he relax the parts that have braced for impact for decades. The instruction for September for the season that acts as hinge is to teach trust by practicing it in public, quietly. He is not to argue strangers into agreement. He is not to stockpile superiority. He is to model surrender. Surrender here is not passivity. It is alignment. It is standing inside the current of a trustworthy river and moving where it moves. He will tell others to do the same, not with pressure, but with proof. The proof will be his steadiness in small storms, his mercy in small conflicts, his patience in small delays. If he tries to dramatize, the message will weaken. If he stays simple, the message will sharpen. Awe braided with love becomes the day's main weather. Tears want to form, then choose a different path, flowing as heat in the chest and strength in the knees. He feels rebuilt without replacement. The sphere of peace nested within his chest hums like a tuning fork struck once and left to sing. He understands that this tone will follow him back, and when other noises crowd, he must find it again by stillness, the way a worker finds a familiar tool in a drawer by touch in the dark. The presence in front of him does not withdraw. It rests. It waits for his consent to carry the message. Consent rises almost before he knows he has chosen. Breathe out slow, longer than the in-breath. The tidbit he will carry for the rest of his hours is small and exact. Seasons are hinges. Human calendars are not toys. They are scaffolds that sometimes align with grace in ways that help ordinary people move. September, for reasons he does not need to master, will be such a hinge. Much will swing. Air will move through rooms that have been sealed. The noise-sick and the fear-tired will have a chance to let go of their props and hold on to a person they cannot see yet can know. He will say it without scandalizing the fragile or entertaining the reckless. He will offer it like the right tool placed in another's palm with a nod. Love continues to do what love does. It supplies what it asks. A courage that is not bravado enters him, quiet as water entering dry soil. He recognizes its texture from rare mornings when he had prayed honestly and then forgot to panic for several hours. Now it is stronger, more steady. With it arrives instruction about tone. Speak with gentleness that does not shake. Warn without threatening. Name the adversary without becoming a megaphone for his noise. Keep the eyes on holy love, because what we behold we echo. Soften the gaze. Let the tongue rest lightly. The corridor around him glows as if celebrating agreement. The attending beings stand like trellises waiting for a vine to climb, dignified and necessary but never the point. Ethan knows what he must do and what he must refuse. He must do the work of telling. He must refuse the lure of theatrics. He must call people to prayer, to forgiveness, to practical kindness that reads as unfashionable in a season that prizes speed and spectacle. He must remind households to keep small lights ready for short outages, to learn neighbors' names, to keep medicines and water, to create a contact chain not because panic sees monsters, but because love anticipates need. Even here, the charge remains one piece. Prepare hearts first, then hands, and let fear be the last voice, not the first. He stands inside a final wave of nearness that seals what has been given. It carries the taste of iron and honey, strength and sweetness paired. His body is far away, yet its memory is almost welcome now. He will carry these gifts into gravity and time. He will carry them into rooms that still leak and into arguments that still run hot. He will carry them into September when the hinge begins to turn and the door swings wider than any headline can describe. Awe remains. Love remains. And the assignment settles into him the way a key settles into its place on a ring, ready for use, already familiar in the hand. Return begins like a tide reversing in slow motion. The corridor that had widened into home now folds inward with the elegance of linen gathered by careful hands. Light keeps its kindness even as distance increases. Ethan feels the pull turning, the way a river eddies near a bank before rejoining the main flow. You stay beside him as the brightness thins and the old world thickens, as holiness does what love often does when the work is assigned, it sends. The first sensation is weight teasing the edges of his awareness, not harsh, more like a coat placed across shoulders after a summer evening chills. The hum in his chest remains, a steady tone that belongs to peace and will be his reference in noisy rooms. Gravity introduces itself again. Air gains texture. The silence that had learned the shape of his soul loosens its embrace but does not abandon it. He understands that what was given is not a postcard from a distant shore, it is a companion. The tunnel tightens. Color simplifies into familiar palettes. Asphalt gray, porchwood brown, sky ink bruised by streetlight. Sound returns with clutter, first as a rolled wave, then as strands, a shoe scraping concrete, a distant dog naming the hour, a neighbor's voice stepping back into syllables and worry. The ocean inside his ears becomes evening again. The body is waiting on the ground, like a house closed for winter. He approaches the door, the key turns, he re-enters. Pain arrives with a blunt honesty that almost reads as welcome. Not because pain is a friend, but because it verifies embodiment. Ribs sting, shoulder throbs, breath drags like a stubborn door. The abdomen clenches as if surprised to find its work again. He feels each complaint register, then he notices the new thing. Gratitude flooding through the ache like warm water through cold pipes. The main emotion opens without instruction. Overwhelmed gratitude. He is alive, and the word alive has been renamed by what he has seen. Breathe in, slow and steady. Neighbors hover at the edge of his returning awareness, faces knotted by fear and relief. Hands hover, then land. Someone steadies the back of his head. Someone checks for pulse, though pulse has already declared itself like a drum that refuses to be subtle. Ethan hears his own name and lets it settle, no longer as a call to hustle, now as a confirmation of place. You remain with him on the plank between two rooms, 1 foot each, until both feet belong to hear again. The world seems louder than necessary. Night insects resume their braille song. A far siren paints a red stripe across the mind's canvas. The porch bulb, offended by its own smallness after his encounter with living light, still throws a halo that pleases moths. He senses that he should be frightened by the return, yet the fear does not find purchase. The tone in his chest shields like a gentle hand, reminding him that nearness did not dissolve in re-entry. The nearness persists like quiet pressure under the sternum even as pain and noise resume, and this becomes that day's small lesson that he will carry forward like a tool in his pocket. Soften the jaw, let your shoulders drop. Home receives him with a gravity more tender than the planet beneath it. A doorway that has framed everyday arrivals now frames a new man, though his gait is uneven and the breath still staggers. Family rushes close and steadies back, caught between the need to hold and the fear of hurting what hurts. He reads their faces and feels that same tide of gratitude move through the room. The ordinary remains intact: shoes by the mat, a jacket on a chair, the faint sweetness of soap still drying in the laundry room, but each item glows as if named in a blessing he did not speak. The body keeps reporting, muscles tremble, skin remembers the scrape, headache lifts its flag, yet inside, the anchor hums. The sphere of peace planted in the corridor holds its place like a mooring sunk to bedrock. He learns a new rhythm on the spot. Exhale through the complaint, inhale through the hum. He practices it until the nervous system takes the hint and stops setting out flares for a disaster that is not happening. The temptation to dramatize rises and falls like an old habit checking the locks. He lets it pass. The encounter has not made him a performer. It has made him a steward. He senses the message forming on his tongue, not for spectacle, not for pride, but because truth resists hoarding. September will act like a hinge. Hearts will need preparing more than storerooms. Fear will not help. Trust will. He hears these shapes inside and keeps them close, not yet flung into the world, first tested by the quiet of his own house. Relax the hinge of the hips, plant the feet. Sleep will not come easily that first night, not the usual kind. Instead, he lies with eyes half open and lets memory flow in careful streams so the bank does not break. He rehearses not to cling but to confirm. The light that arranged him, the beings whose stillness steadied him, the presence that held him known without accusation, the charge as clear as weather on a day with no humidity. Return, speak plainly, call for trust, teach surrender with your life. Pain teaches patience. Between waves, he practices the small obediences that will soon become his public language. He counts breath and keeps it soft. He absorbs the house sounds and blesses them rather than curses the interruption. He watches the window square change shade by shade as night moves its furniture. And in all this, he experiences a paradox that will instruct him for years. Some aches lose power when Thanksgiving stands beside them like a calm friend. The next day's motions come simple. He eats slowly, not because appetite hides, but because gratitude insists. He steps into morning light and discovers that even the familiar street holds a second river beneath its surface. He greets a neighbor with a look that says more than small talk ever could. He fixes a simple breakfast and finds that humility now seasons his food better than salt. The cadence of work resumes, lighter by one invisible stone. In it, he recognizes a tidbit he will hand to others in coming days. The holy does not always change your schedule. It changes your posture inside the schedule you already have. He sets aside a chair and a notebook. The first obedience must be written before it is spoken. He does not chase eloquence. He accepts clarity. He writes that the revealing will ask people to choose trust over panic. He writes that fear can be noticed and then relieved of the microphone. He writes that preparing the heart is not vague sentiment but daily habits that train attention toward peace, rising 10 minutes earlier for silence, forgiving small debts before they become large, keeping a modest reserve of water and light for neighbors as much as for oneself. He refuses to turn this into a brand or a crusade. He lets it be bread. By noon, he has enough sentences to confess what happened without spectacle. He is not ashamed of the porch, the ladder, the fall. He is not proud of it either. He is grateful for the mercy that met him where clumsiness and chance overlap. His body still complains. He answers with the rhythm learned in the night. Inhale the hum, exhale the ache. He notices how stress tries to return like a stray cat and finds the door closed by a piece he did not manufacture. This, he decides, must be told also, because it is the test of authenticity, the nearness that remains when the music of the corridor is out of earshot. Evening brings family around a table that has heard arguments and birthdays and Tuesday boredom. Tonight it hears quiet. The message cannot remain private. He speaks, not with quotations or dramatics, but with steady cadence. A door in time is beginning to move. Hidden things will come into light. The call is to prepare the inside more than the outside and to pair prayer with simple readiness so love can act quickly when needed. He keeps his sentences short so the room can breathe. You witness the shift as it starts small. Air feels cleaner. Fear loses one layer of costume. Gratitude keeps overflowing its container. The ache still nips, yet it introduces itself now as a tutor rather than a tyrant. The day closes with a discipline that will be his flashlight when the hinge of September begins to swing. He thanks God for 3 small mercies, he lays down the need to control, and he rests inside the tone that never left his chest. The circle is small at first, a table cleared of crumbs, a notebook that bends obediently, a cheap pen that scratches like a cricket in tall grass. Dawn is a pale bruise at the window, and the house keeps that held breath between night and breakfast. Ethan sits where the light will find him and chooses the quiet that used to feel like absence. You move into the stillness with him, a step at a time, placing each thought like a tool back on its hook. He writes what is true without decoration. The day before, the hum in the chest, the hinge that approaches, the call that refuses panic and insists on trust. The sentences arrive short and honest. They do not audition, they land. He learns the shape of obedience in minutes, not grand vows. The page receives him and does not argue. The pen warms in his fingers as the room brightens by grains. Outside, a garbage truck coughs and clanks its way down the block. He does not resent the noise. He lets it be the drum that reminds him he is writing for real streets. Coffee steams, toast pops. A child asks for a jacket he cannot find. The household begins, and his posture inside it is different, lighter by one invisible stone. Resolve settles, not stiff, not loud, steady like a good plank underfoot. He tells a few, not many. He chooses people who have seen his ordinary and will not mistake this for a searchlight aimed at himself. He speaks the way he has been instructed to speak, plain and careful. September will act like a hinge. Prepare the heart more than the storeroom. Keep your neighbors near enough to reach. Trust is oxygen. Fear is noise. The words enter kitchens and living rooms where laundry is folded and meals are planned. Worry and wonder sit beside each other on the same couch. You can see both in their eyes, a flit toward alarm and then the slower nod that comes when something rings true without fanfare. Breathe in slowly. Let the breath widen the ribs. He records a simple message with a phone propped against a mug. No music, no flashing text. The room carries the gentle hiss of a heater. He speaks as if a single friend were across the table. The hum under his sternum guides his cadence, keeping it from running in fear or dragging in pride. Outside, a dog barks at a delivery. Inside, the pen waits for round 2. He ends and does not check numbers. He makes breakfast. He answers a small kindness that presents itself at the sink. He walks out into a morning that smells like damp concrete and cold tires and wet leaves. The first confirmations arrive like sparrows, common and precise. A stranger writes that the same early hour woke them and the same word pressed on their mind. A neighbor he has not spoken to in years brings over an extra flashlight because it felt right to share. The stoplight that lingered last week returns to a normal cycle, but the patience it taught remains. Small patterns begin to echo the charge. The hinge is not theatrical. It is steady and sure. Doors swing on pins the eye never honored until now. He learns to walk in silence for a block before starting the truck. He watches the sky, decide on a color, and names what he is grateful for without letting the list turn to performance. He pauses before speech more than once and finds that half the sentences he was about to offer were built by fear or hurry. The withheld words do not leave a hole. They make room for better ones or for none at all. This becomes the day's tidbit he will hand to anyone who asks how to hear more clearly. Simple acts, repeated. Right before the world talks, walk without noise, pause before you add yours. Attention is a muscle. These are the light weights that train it. Soften the eyes, release the shoulders away from the ears. Early listeners bring their weather. One is all edge, practical concerns stacked like pallets. Another is tender as a willow and ready to sway with any breeze. Ethan answers both with the same tone that carried him through the corridor. No scolding for fear, no reward for panic. He offers footholds you can touch. Keep a little water stored for yourself and for someone else. Write down 5 phone numbers on paper because batteries do not ask permission to die. Choose 1 hour to pray or breathe quietly each day and keep that hour as you keep an appointment that matters. He finds that concrete helps hearts believe that trust is not a vapor. Coincidences do not perform tricks. They line up like quiet streetlights at dusk. A sermon heard in passing lifts the same phrase he wrote an hour before. A headline tries to bait panic and instead becomes a reminder to practice the breath that knows where to return. A missed turn adds 5 minutes to a commute and spares him from a heavy tangle that snarled the usual route. He does not build a shrine to any of it. He notes the pattern and thanks the giver rather than the gifts. The point is not to harvest omens. The point is to let peace teach the eyes. He keeps the message small and daily. He checks in on an elder and replaces batteries in a smoke alarm that has chirped for weeks. He texts two old friends and says he is praying that their homes become oases of calm. He arranges a short neighborhood meet to trade names and numbers and remind each other where shut-off valves live. The meeting smells like coffee and cold hallways and the citrus hand soap the community center always buys. People show up in work boots and in slippers. Some smile at nothing. Some study the floor to keep from studying their own unease. The room leaves a little steadier than it arrived. Relax the mouth, loosen the back of the neck. Resolve becomes the main weather inside him. It does not pick fights. It keeps a schedule. He writes before sunrise and does not apologize for the quiet he needs to protect. He walks in silence and lets the street teach him humility. He pauses before speaking and watches how often quiet carries more truth than comments ever could. He lays a small kit in a closet where anyone can find it. He places a candle and a lighter in a drawer he will remember in the dark. He checks the lines that connect his household to others and makes sure no one is standing alone. Wonder still meets worry in his listeners. He accepts both and keeps offering the same rhythm. Prepare your heart. Trust when noise pushes. Act with mercy in small things so that when larger things arrive, your muscles already know the motion. The confirmations keep stacking and staying simple. A teenager offers to shovel an elder's walk without being asked. A teacher begins a 2-minute quiet at the start of class and notices the room stop buzzing. A coworker who used to joke about everything asks where to begin if a person wanted to pray again after years of not bothering. Ethan does not claim these as trophies. He treats them as seedlings that need regular water and shade from harsh speech. He returns to his chair the next dawn and writes only what he can live that day. The hum in his chest remains, the ache in his shoulder remains too. They coexist without argument, and in their pairing he learns again what authenticity means. The holy is not allergic to real life. The holy chooses it, moves through it, and rearranges it from the inside until ordinary rooms carry a weight that steadies tired hearts. The day ends with the simplest prayer he knows. Thank you for being near. Keep my hands ready. Keep my words clean. What he once labeled supernatural now reads as most natural. What he once called ordinary appears thin by comparison, a valuable training ground but not the whole map. The corridor positions him between both without tearing him. He belongs to both for a moment, and in that belonging he becomes more himself than he has ever been. Calm carries him, names him, and becomes his first obedience. He senses a greater presence ahead, not a surprise, more a fulfillment. The beings let the awareness be. They add no commentary, because commentary would shorten distance with words when love intends to close it with presence. He receives their discretion as elegant hospitality. The procession pauses without stopping. Light grows a fraction stronger, then rests. The sphere within his chest hums with a tone that tells him the anchor will hold. He knows this the way he knows his name in a crowd, not as information but as identity. Reverent calm remains in the air, and your lungs mirror it as if tuned by a careful hand. The passage waits. Ethan waits. You wait. No one hurries the hour. Order stands where chaos once shouted. The next moment approaches on quiet feet, bringing assurance that true guidance will continue to arrange rather than insist. Nothing is demanded. Everything is offered. Brightness gathers until brightness becomes presence, and presence becomes knowledge without syllables. Ethan recognizes the holy not by shape, but by the way love thickens the air and arranges all stray thought into quiet. You move with him as warmth presses through like morning sun on winter glass, soft on the skin, certain at the core. Awe rises first, a tide that lifts without drowning. Then love threads through the awe, braiding steadiness into wonder so his knees do not give way. The corridor does not disappear, it bows by growing simple. Even the attending beings step back in a courtesy that needs no instruction. The world narrows to nearness. The knowing lands like rain after long cloud. He is seen, not scanned. He is known, not measured. All the rooms he kept locked, the names he kept hidden, the fears he fed because he believed they fed him back, all of them are known and not despised. Acceptance is not indulgence here. It is fire that does not scorch. He stands inside a regard that carries both holiness and tenderness without splitting either in half. You feel it across your own shoulders like a garment placed there by hands that never hurry. Breathe in softly. Meaning forms in him the way dawn forms on still water. He understands without argument that he is being given a task that is also a gift and also a cross. He will return to the world of air and ache, but he will not return empty. The message arrives as a complete shape. A season begins soon, and it will serve as a hinge. It is less about dates and more about a turning. Hidden things will come forward. Masks will fatigue. The world will feel the swing of a door it cannot keep shut, not because of disaster as spectacle, but because truth wants light the way lungs want oxygen. The charge is simple and therefore heavy. Prepare the heart rather than the pantry of anxieties. Keep charity near the front door. Maintain peace like a lamp that is refilled before it gutters. When shaking comes, refuse the reflex of panic and practice the habit of trust. Fear will offer urgency. Trust will offer oxygen. He is to say these things plainly, not as a brand, not as a performance, but as daily bread handed to neighbors with clean hands. You hear the shape of it and feel how it refuses to flatter or threaten. It calls and steadies. Soften the jaw, let the breath lengthen. Love does not stand at a distance while giving assignments. It moves nearer until the space between giver and receiver reads as one. Ethan notices how his oldest dread, the suspicion that he could be forgotten by the very love that made him curls like paper and becomes ash without smoke. He has not been forgotten. He has been awaited. The relief does not unmake responsibility. It blesses it. The message is not a doom bell. It is an invitation bell. The revealing that comes will not be a punishment designed by cruelty. It will be the mercy of clarity. What is stable will show itself stable. What is flimsy will lose its charm and invite rebuilding. The light in front of him brightens by degrees the way a skilled musician raises volume without losing tone. Within the brightness, attention focuses on him with a tenderness that makes confession natural even when words do not appear. He knows where he has cut corners, where impatience has roughened his speech, where he has treated prayer like a task rather than a conversation. None of this surprises the holy. The knowing refuses to collapse into shame. Instead, it invites origin. Return to the center where love was first. Begin again from there and keep beginning. Loosen the shoulders and the tongue. He learns one more thing, as clear as anything he has ever known. Keep my steps inside your current. He sleeps with windows cracked to let in the smell of wet earth and the murmur of far tires. You rest your own attention there, in that unremarkable symphony that comes from streets and trees and weathered houses. The hinge is not here yet, at least not by the calendar. Yet something has begun. The small circles hold. The resolve holds. The message keeps choosing the same doorway into the world. Humble, repeatable, true. Warnings arrive like weather fronts along a coast. They do not own the shoreline, but they visit, and wise households learn the pattern. Ethan understands this and refuses glitter or doom. He names the tremors as labor more than ending, pain that signals birth rather than collapse. You walk the blocks with him as he turns warning into steadying, the way a parent turns a loud noise into a calm explanation so a child can keep breathing. Urgent sobriety becomes the day's air. Not alarm, not denial. Just a clear-eyed acceptance that shaking visits every generation, and love is supposed to be ready. He begins with the body because fear lives there first. He teaches a breath that remembers the hum under his sternum, the anchor that never left. In through the nose, slow enough that the ribs spread like careful drawers, out through the mouth, longer than the in, so the nervous system hears the lullaby it keeps forgetting. This is not a trick. It is permission. Panic is fast and loud. Trust favors long exhale. He practices it in traffic, in lines, in the aisle between flour and cooking oil, and his steadiness becomes contagious. You try it now, and the spine stops shouting that danger is everywhere. Breathe in through the nose, exhale twice as long. Practical steps follow, not as superstition but as hospitality. He calls emergencies by their real names: storm, flood, illness, supply glitch, then places preparation back in its plain clothes. The humble checklist is the tidbit he repeats until neighbors can recite it without looking. Clean water enough for a few days, light that does not depend on weathered wires, medicines that matter, organized where they can be found in the dark, a contact tree that keeps no one isolated and expects everyone to check on someone. He adds small tools that dignify households: tape, a wrench, a can opener, matches kept dry, cash in small bills for when machines forget how to count. Not for hoarding, for mercy. When shaking comes, love moves fastest if the hands already know what to reach for. He avoids spectacle and resists rumor. Floods are not proof that the sky hates us. Epidemics are not inventions of enemies who share our streets. Wildfire, quake, and wind do what they have always done, and the faithful answer the way saints have always answered, with prayer that is not passive and with action that is not panicked. He teaches neighbors how to turn off the gas without breaking anything. He helps a block captain Mark who needs refrigeration for medicine so a generator can be borrowed when the grid forgets its job. He sets times when people will knock on doors after a storm passes, not to satisfy curiosity, but to count hearts and hands and make sure they keep beating and holding. Soften the jaw, let the shoulders fall from the ears. He gives language to the undercurrent. The adversary hides in noise that makes people forget each other. When panic rises, people argue about blame, while water rises in basements that could be emptied if conversation remembered a bucket. He refuses to be a megaphone for that noise. He keeps statements short enough to carry while climbing stairs: drink, rest, care, pray, share. He teaches households to cook one pot more than they need during a long week, and to choose a neighbor who will receive it without embarrassment. In this season, the stubborn habit of pride needs gentle interruption. The pot does that work without speeches. On a Wednesday, rain soaks the neighborhood in sheets that make the gutters complain. The creek that behaves like a tame animal 9 months of the year remembers it has a wild past. He does not turn the sky into a sermon. He checks the yard of the elder who lives alone at the bottom of the slope. He clears a drain. He moves a box that never mattered until water taught it to. He sends 2 texts and receives 3 replies. The contact tree grows leaves, small notes of duty fulfilled. No one becomes a hero. No one becomes a ghost. The work is dull enough to be holy. He addresses illness with the same modesty. Wash the hands like you mean it. Keep a drawer of simple remedies. Learn to rest before collapse forces the decision. Keep your distance when a fever asks for it, and shorten the distance again with a meal left at a door and a call that says the house is held in prayer. Epidemics turn suspicion into a reflex. He turns compassion into a muscle memory stronger than suspicion. No one needs a handshake to feel seen. A steady voice and consistent help do the work better than contact ever could. Relax the back of the neck, soften the gaze. People ask about prophecy because they want a shortcut through fear. He refuses timelines and theater. He returns always to trust practice like a craft. He calls the shaking labor and insists that labor is not the end of a child. He asks people to bless their thresholds before weather arrives, to name their rooms as places of peace, to forbid their screens from owning the first and last hour of the day. He encourages small communal rituals that shape attention without requiring permission from institutions mid-afternoon, mercy prayers, shared lists to track the vulnerable, a weekly hour reserved for fixing what is easy to ignore until it breaks during rain. You watch skepticism soften in those who prefer data. He honors their caution by keeping receipts for every claim. He never pretends a storm avoided them because they prayed. He notes instead how prayer kept them human while they responded. Others want drama. He disappoints them kindly. The hinge of September will swing whether the feed shrieks or purrs. The task is to be ready to love when doors open and contents spill into streets that cannot hold more blame. He says it again in the simplest way he can make it. Prepare your heart, then your hands, then your street, in that order. He keeps naming the posture that steadies. Knees bent just enough to absorb impact, eyes level enough to avoid tripping or tripping others, mouth gentle enough to keep oxygen in the room. He tells little parables written in errands. The person who cut you off is a tired nurse. The clerk who forgot your discount is caring for a parent who does not sleep at night. The neighbor who decorated the block with loud music on a hard day is hiding grief in the base. Replace the speech that punishes with action that includes. If a storm kills the power, extension cords become bridges. If a virus thins the staff, patience becomes payroll, mercy scales. On a dry Saturday, the neighborhood meets again. Folding chairs squeak on a gym floor. The air smells like old varnish and fresh oranges. People bring what they can. Spare batteries, spare blankets, spare time. They sketch a map and mark who has a generator and who has a grill. They decide who will walk to the elder apartments if cell service shrugs. Children stack bottled water into a shape that accidentally looks like hope. No speeches succeed as well as these small logistics. You can feel the block exhale. The hinge is not here yet in the way the calendar will count. but everyone has practiced opening. Ethan returns home and writes the simplest sentences he has ever written. He refuses the itch to be impressive. He describes how the creek looked from the elders' back steps. He writes how a child took the initiative to pair blankets with names. He notes how the breath works when panic tests the ribs. He reminds readers that a lamp in a drawer is not proof of fear, it is a vote for mercy. He adds a line that will become refrain for him in the days to come. The humble checklist serves love by keeping it quick on its feet: water, light, medicine, a contact tree. If that seed takes root, the first gust will find a forest and not a field. Noise sells itself as normal, and the adversary prefers rented rooms to haunted houses. Ethan learns this on errands that smell like rubber mats and floor cleaner, in queues that hum with pop hooks and blinking screens. You move through the same aisles, and the lesson sharpens. The old enemy rarely announces himself with spectacle. He borrows hurry and hides in scorn. He feeds on comparison, then hands out exhaustion like a free sample. Righteous clarity becomes the day's weather. Not rage, not superiority, just a clean light that shows where lies lean against the furniture of habit. He notices the small traps. A phone that insists the morning belongs to strangers. An outrage that feels like energy but leaves the hands shaky. A sarcasm that curdles coffee before the second sip. The enemy rides these tiny currents the way a thief rides darkness. Ethan refuses to wrestle in shadows. He turns on simple lamps. He blesses the first 10 minutes of the day with thanks for whatever is honest: a roof that held, knees that still carry him, a child's jacket hanging like a bright flag on a chair. Morning gratitude is the first counter. It is a key that unlocks attention before commerce hires it away. Breathe in. Let the ribs widen. Midday tempts him with speed disguised as virtue. He measures it in skipped meals, clipped replies, and a jaw that thinks it must hold up the sky. Here the adversary whispers in fluent productivity. Ethan answers with a pause that feels expensive and is in fact profitable. He steps outside if sky is possible. If not, he looks at a plant on a windowsill until green returns his eyes to human settings. He counts 10 slow breaths without apology. Midday silence is the second counter. It starves the habit of hurry and feeds discernment so decisions stop sounding like alarms. Evening wants anesthesia, and the enemy knows how to pour it. Endless scrolling, one more bite, one more complaint disguised as a conversation. Ethan gives the hour a different name. He practices an examine that uses gentle questions the way a carpenter uses a square. Where did I cooperate with peace today? Where did I sell my attention to noise? Who needs my amends before the sun forgets me? No shaming, only alignment. Evening examine is the third counter. It turns the bed into an altar where the next day is already being blessed with honesty. Soften the jaw, let the shoulders fall. He walks through systems that reward speed over truth and feels the tug to comply. Prices change and tempers spike. Emails pretend to be emergencies. News cycles turn human sorrow into content. The adversary thrives here because fog is his favorite weather. Ethan resists with surrender rather than spectacle. He confesses quickly when he wrongs a coworker. He reads scripture in small portions that behave like stone in a pocket, weight you can touch when wind rises. He keeps a weekly meal open to one person who cannot repay. Shared bread becomes a quiet protest against the economy of attention that would rather we shop each other than serve each other. He names the enemy without fascination. The presence that hates image bearers will always try to reduce people to roles: consumer, vote, click, nuisance. Resistance looks like rehumanizing with small sentences and chosen slowness. He learns to say names before opinions. He makes eye contact in places that train everyone to stare at rectangles. He returns carts to their stalls because order blesses the next stranger. None of this trends, all of it breaks spells. Relax the back of the neck, breathe out longer than you breathed in. Gossip calls like a carnival. It offers a sugary high and leaves a metallic aftertaste. Ethan refuses to turn people into entertainment. He remembers that contempt is a thin mask for fear. He asks for the grace to be bored rather than cruel. When a conversation tips toward shredding, he changes the subject to care, then to action. If there is a real need, the talk becomes tasks. If there is none, the talk expires on its own. The adversary loses oxygen when communities choose candor over performance and service over stories. He watches for counterfeit light. Sometimes cynicism dresses itself as wisdom, sometimes doom calls itself realism. He tests both by their fruit. If a thought makes prayer feel silly and kindness feel naive, it is not from the kingdom he serves. He goes back to the counters that have already held. Gratitude that names specifics, silence that honors breath, examen that tells the truth without bruising hope. He pairs these with sacraments of the ordinary, washing dishes as if cleansing mattered to the soul, sweeping floors as if order prepared the mind for scripture to land, finishing a small repair as if mending were part of prayer. The enemy prefers isolation to argument. Ethan counters by keeping tables warm. He keeps a pot that can stretch for an unexpected guest. He turns family dinners into low-lit liturgies where phones rest face down and each person names one mercy that did not make a headline. He is not sentimental. He knows grief sits at many tables. He invites grief and refuses to let it eat alone. He has learned that shared salt does theology better than lectures on most nights. Breathe in gently, unclench the hands. On days when weather breaks and news runs red, accusations escalate inside rooms where no one is present to defend themselves. He trains his mouth to stay slow and his ears to stay generous. He brings up simple preparations without panic, reminds neighbors where the shutoffs live, and checks on those who might be alone. He brings spare batteries. He brings calm. He brings scripture without pageantry, a psalm folded into a pocket and unfolded when the room needs a spine. Resistance is quiet. It does not trend. It holds. He treats algorithms like mid-level tempters. They are not demons. They are amplifiers that love appetite. He starves them by choosing long attention over strobe light distraction. He reads one long piece end to end instead of 20 shallow bites. He prays for the strangers behind the avatars. He refuses to perform sadness. He refuses to monetize dread. He refuses to turn mourning into theater. In this restraint, he discovers joy that feels like clean linen in sun, simple and able to last. Break the breath low into the belly. Let it leave slow. The day's tidbit becomes a rule of life he can teach in 1 minute without props. Morning gratitude, so the day starts owned by praise, not panic. Midday silence, so choices find oxygen. Evening examine, so the next dawn inherits truth instead of fog. He pairs this with confession when pride strains the seams, scripture when memory needs rebar, and shared meals when loneliness tries to draft him into the enemy's army of bitter experts. The counters add up. They make rooms sane. They make streets kinder. They make the hinge ahead feel less like a threat and more like a door for which hearts can be ready. Clarity holds to the end of the week like a clear bell in cold air. Ethan can feel the adversary adjusting tactics, moving from noise to numbness, from hurry to heaviness. He answers by standing under streams that do not run dry. A psalm before headlines, a walk before wires, a call to a friend before scrolling on strangers. He keeps the heart porous to grace and less available to bait. He keeps choosing slowness in small things so speed cannot own him in large ones. When fatigue insists he choose despair, he returns to the counters like a pilot returning to instruments. They steady him through cloud until the lights of home appear again. He lies down, the house quiet, the neighborhood humming like a low choir you can only hear when you stop trying. You are there with him, awake enough to notice how peace has a temperature and a texture. It rests warm along the ribs. It smooths the space between thoughts. It keeps you human when 1,000 little incentives would rather you turn into a brand or a boulder. Righteous clarity remains the evening's tone. The adversary is not impressive. He is predictable. And the counters keep the soul oriented toward the one who does not shout, but who speaks in the long exhale and the shared bread and the honest review of the day that keeps us tender for whatever the hinge reveals next. The circle widens the way dawn slides across a continent while most people make coffee. Testimony leaves kitchens and crosses porches. It walks down nave aisles that smell like wax and old wood. It glows on small screens that warm cold hands at bus stops. You move with it from block to parish to feed, watching strangers become kin by practicing the same simple things at the same time. Solidarity rises like a tide without a moon, pulled by a gravity hidden inside mercy. It starts with whispers and ends with a rhythm. A nurse in a city basement prays between alarms. A farmer pauses in a field with rain in the cuffs of his jeans. A teacher leans on a desk while the hallway roars, and for 1 full minute the mind returns to oxygen. The language changes along the map, but the posture does not. Eyes soften, shoulders lower. palms open, as if to show pockets emptied of weapons no one could see. The mid-afternoon becomes a bell without metal, summoning across towns that have never shared a calendar. Cooks rest spatulas, welders stop the spark for 3 breaths. Elder hands that have braided decades now trace the shape of trust on chair arms polished by family stories. Breathe in, slow, let the ribs spread like patient doors. Parishes adjust without fanfare. A side chapel keeps a gentle lamp. A custodian sets a small table with cards that remind anyone who wanders in how to breathe, how to make space for mercy when news tries to rent the mind at premium rates. Confession lines grow humbler and shorter in tone, if not in length. No one advertises change, it just happens. A pastor learns to keep silence at the right moments so attention can turn toward the one who arranges. A choir holds its notes a heartbeat longer. Candles burn with the same small authority as always, yet even their smoke seems to draw letters that spell welcome. The feeds learn new manners. People who once performed opinion begin to practice encouragement. Screens stop owning the first and last hour of the day and are assigned to the middle where they belong. A post goes up at mid-afternoon with a simple reminder to breathe and to remember whoever sits farthest from warm light. It is not inspirational, it is practical. Someone in a high-rise responds by knocking on 2 doors they have never knocked on and finds one neighbor under blankets with a fever and no plan. A second post tells of a simple soup shared in a hallway, of a thermometer traded, of a phone charger loaned. Anonymous hearts begin to sketch the same story without trying to be original. Mercy is repetition. Mercy is chorus. Mercy does not care who wrote the line first. Soften the eyes, unclench the jaw. Storms help in a severe way. Wind chooses a coast and tests roofs that have been procrastinating. Water chases basements and argues with worlds that forgot. Gravity is patient but not forgetful. The shaking exposes foundations, and you see where attention has been placed for years without checking whether the ground could hold it. Yet in these hours, hidden saints rise like stones long buried by silt. A shop owner with a generator strings a quiet web of orange cords that hold medications and sleep machines and one electric kettle that keeps making something warm to drink. A teenager bikes through standing water to deliver a bag of batteries and the reassurance of a consistent face. A teacher who knows maps draws one for a block of elders so they know who is closest by foot, not by friend list. Ethan does not choreograph any of this. He tells what he knows in a voice that people recognize from kitchens, and then he keeps moving at the speed of love, which is slower than trend and faster than bureaucracy. You stay with him as texts arrive in 3 languages at once, different words for the same current. The plan is not perfect, so it is human enough to hold. Mid-afternoon still marks the center each day. Even in crisis, even when schedules fracture, a hush runs through rooms like a breeze touching curtains. Forks rest, phones slide to the side, hands that have been busy lift in quiet surrender. Breathe out longer than the in, let the shoulders settle. Workplaces notice the change and let it become policy without paperwork. A warehouse supervisor points to a clock and does not have to say anything. The line slows by a small percentage, mistakes drop by a larger one. In a clinic, a resident writes that mid-afternoon now lands like a friendly tide. Blood pressure cuffs come off, nurses stretch their backs at the wall. The hallway takes 1 exact minute to forgive itself. Not much more, not less. Then work resumes with fewer sharp edges, and patients feel it without being told. Small works of mercy keep multiplying. A church pantry starts stocking allergy-friendly items because someone finally asked. A landlord waives a late fee because the tenant has been caring for a parent at home, and the numbers do not always equal the hours. A mechanic tapes a note under the hood to remind a future stranger to check a belt that will fail quietly on a lonely road. None of these make a splash. All of them keep boats afloat. Relax the back of the neck. Inhale through the nose, slow. The testimonies do not try to be dramatic. They try to be accurate. A woman in a mountain town writes that she felt seen while filling a bird feeder because the same hour had just settled on a coastal city where someone else was kneeling to fix a heater filter. A man who had not prayed since childhood reports that the mid-afternoon hush felt like a bench offered in a crowded station. Neither of them argues about origins. They both go buy extra candles and text 3 names they have neglected. Across borders, across time zones, the same practice keeps finding the next set of hands ready to steady it. Solidarity becomes the climate of rooms that used to be either chilly with suspicion or hot with performance. You can sense it in the way feet plant when a story is told. in the way eyes meet and do not dart away as quickly, in the way laughter returns without cruelty braided inside it. The hinge has not yet swung to its widest, still the house knows which way the wind will blow and opens windows in advance so nothing rattles out of proportion. At a parish hall that smells like coffee and mop water, a map is taped to a wall. Pins mark kitchens that can feed 8 in a pinch. Another color marks apartments with stairs that intimidate elders. Circles indicate prayer clusters that keep the mid-afternoon intact even when schedules make attention difficult. 3 or 4 people promising to cover the hour together so no one has to manufacture devotion alone. Ethan walks the room and says little. He does not need to be the center. The center is already occupied by a presence that arranges without insisting on credit. The day's tidbit is the simplest yet and the most transferable. A fixed hour creates a rope across distance. When hands reach for it at once, even if they cannot see each other, the few are strengthened and the many are steadied. Mid-afternoon is not magic. It is a meeting place chosen because people can actually reach it. It teaches consistency the way bell towers used to, the way tide charts still do. Anchors need a bottom, hours need a center. Homes need a chord to hum when no one is singing. This becomes that chord. Evening settles, candles learn the names of rooms, screens dim before voices do. The river of testimony runs quieter now, not because it is shrinking, but because the banks have deepened and the current has found its bed. You move through the neighborhoods and feel how the same small practices have stitched blocks into quilts. You do not feel famous, you feel connected. The word together stops meaning crowd and starts meaning sustained. Breathe in, release the tongue from the roof of the mouth, exhale like you are setting down weight. Solidarity holds through a long night that tries to test it. Wind presses against windows. A transformer complains somewhere far. The city pauses. In house after house, people return to the counters that have served them well, gratitude for what held, silence to hear instructions that always come, examen to mark where love was welcomed and where it was ignored. And there, in the middle of a map wider than anyone can see, mid-afternoon arrives like a promise remembered, and the world bows for 60 honest seconds, as if listening for a key to turn in a far door. The hinge is close. Hearts are closer. September does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives like a door you have passed 1,000 times, suddenly swinging a few inches wider. Hinges speak in metal whispers. Air moves. Papers you thought were settled lift from the desk. You feel it first in the body before the headlines learn the word. A slight tilt in the day that asks whether you will reach for panic's handle or for trust's. Hopeful courage becomes the weather of your chest. The hum under Ethan's sternum steadies him as he stands where street and sanctuary cross. You are there too, standing beside him, both of you learning how to move inside a turning. Breathe in, slow. Let the ribs widen and the shoulders follow. Revealing accelerates. The masks that once held a life together fatigue and fall. In houses that kept secrets like heirlooms, windows learn to open. In offices that worshiped the rush, a silence at mid-afternoon begins to sound like health rather than theft. In neighborhoods that had forgotten names, doors crack with the sound of hinge and laughter. Foundations are tested, and the test is embarrassingly simple. Does this hold kindness when shook? If not, it was scaffolding and must be rebuilt. The storms and sicknesses that ride the season are not trophies for the fearful. They are tutors for the faithful. They show us what bends and what breaks, and they do it with a clarity that feels severe and, if we listen, merciful. Ethan speaks plainly. He refuses the drama that would turn a mission into a brand. He says what the presence taught him to say before gravity gave his breath back. Prepare hearts, then hands, then streets. The order is important because fear always reverses it and calls the reversal wisdom. He tells anyone willing to hear that surrender is not collapse. It is the honest admission that the river knows the way better than the stone knows how to stand. He urges a kind of steady that looks passive to the hurried and looks courageous to the wise. His voice carries kitchen calm into rooms that love microphones. Soften the jaw, lengthen your exhale, unclench the hands. The revealing pulls back thin paint. You see where bitterness has been passed down as a family recipe. You see where contempt has been sold as discernment. You see where greed learned how to dress like prudence. The adversary tries to ride the moment with a raised voice and a fast tempo, but the learned counters hold. People refuse bait with small disciplines. They begin their mornings with gratitude before the feed asks for their loyalty. They keep mid-afternoon as a quiet bell that shapes attention. They end evenings with examine that names where love led and where fear dressed up as logic. Courage grows from these repetitions like callus grows in a hand that chooses useful tools day after day. Breathe through the nose, let the belly rise, release the shoulders down. You move through the days without costume. The air tastes like rain before it falls. The light has that almost autumn brass that makes colors honest. Streets smell like rubber and bread, oil and laundry steam. The world keeps being the world, but it is less successful at pretending that things built on noise can carry a soul. You notice your choices in the mouth, bitter when contempt wins, sweet when you forgive on purpose. You notice your feet, lighter when they carry small mercies to tired doors, heavy when they return from errands that fed only vanity. The hinge does not yell at you, it invites you to see. Ethan gives the tidbit that becomes a rope for many hands. Pair a breath prayer with a neighborly check-in. Inhale a sentence so short it can ride the breath. Exhale a sentence that gives it away. Then send a text, or knock once, or slide an envelope under a door, with nothing but love inside. The twofold rhythm is the season's metronome. Inside the chest, be near, I trust you. Inside the street, you on my heart. How can I help? He teaches it without flourishes because he wants grandmothers and teenagers and welders and teachers to be able to keep the time without needing a choir. Relax the back of the neck, soften the gaze, breathe out longer than the in. Because choosing happens in small rooms before it becomes a public witness, he keeps repeating what you already know and keep forgetting. Striving feels like strength until it breaks your sleep. Surrender looks like weakness until it lends you a spine and wind. Panic feels like data until it robs you of wisdom. Trust looks like quiet until it builds a bridge across a street where the power went out and voices decided to share. You watch people choose in lines, on porches, at the edge of hospital beds. Some choose rage and grow smaller. Some choose rest and become large enough to hold a frightened world with a cup of water and a steady word. The storms do come, and when they do, the rehearsals matter. A flood tests who knows the nearest shutoff and who has a pump and who remembers which neighbor keeps their keys in the third ceramic mug by the stove. An illness tests the strength of the contact tree more than the strength of opinions. A supply glitch tests whether hoarding won or whether mercy trained itself to move without fanfare. September keeps turning the world in small clicks, and with each click, a bit of varnish comes away. What is wood stands, what is veneer asks to be replaced. This is not cruelty. It is love refusing to let us keep lies that collapse under the smallest weather. Breathe in, hold for the quiet count of 2, let the breath go like setting a box down. Hope becomes muscle memory. It lives in knees that bend before they break. It lives in hands that remember which drawer holds the lamp without hunting. It lives in voices that know the cadence of honesty and cannot be bullied into volume. It lives in houses where the morning starts with 3 gratitudes and the evening ends with 1 amend. It lives in parishes where mid-afternoon has become a bell, whether or not a tower stands. You feel it in your own body, the way the hum under your sternum starts before prayer sometimes, as if prayer were catching up to what presence had already decided to give. Ethan does not become the point. He keeps pointing. He keeps lending courage by remaining ordinary in public and holy in private. He keeps the breath prayer and the neighborly check-in like a drumbeat beneath the melody of his hours. And you, walking beside him, begin to hear the same drum. You start to match it without counting. You reach for trust faster than you used to reach for panic. You surrender sooner than you used to strive. The hinge keeps moving, a door that will never again sit fully closed. Air keeps flowing. Rooms keep learning the shape of peace. You are choosing, breath by breath, hand by hand, hour by hour, and courage keeps its promise. It feels like hope with work boots on. The turning slows at the edge of evening, like a train easing into a station where many will step down and many will climb aboard. You have walked the hours, steadying your breath when noise asked for the keys, steadying your hands when fear asked for the steering wheel. You have watched the door swing and felt the wind insist that hidden things cannot hide forever. This is not the end pressing on your window. It is a beginning that prefers humble rooms. So take this minute and let it be gentle. Lengthen every sentence. Let every image soften at the edges. The rooms you care for do not need your performance. They need your presence and the God who meets presence with more. Picture the faces that have shared these weeks with you, the ones who handed you a flashlight without asking for credit, the ones who wrote their numbers on paper when batteries were vain, the ones who paused with you each mid-afternoon. Feel the weight of trust settle like a shawl across your shoulders. Taste the simple food of this hour, bread that does not ask to be praised, water that does not apologize for being plain. Hear the city a little further away than usual, as if distance were a gift given so your attention could return to where you are. Let your hands rest on the table. Let your eyes soften on whatever is still and honest. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You are not alone. If these words resonate with you, please leave an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus himself has entrusted to you.